This will apply to all of you, and just know that, that regardless of how you did on this exam, things are gonna look a little bit different for the next one, and there'll be some subtle changes until probably about the fourth exam. So just be prepared for that. This is the distribution of raw scores, and I have a formula that I use when I curve scores, that basically what it does is it curves lower scores more. The overall, like it doesn't, nobody passes anybody, but it tightens up the whole distribution. And so our curved scaled scores look like this. Kind of the same general idea though. Basically what it seems to me is there were sort of three pulses, right? This is a trimodal graph. The first pulse were students who, whether it's because they aren't great test takers, or didn't know some or all of the material, were like missed a bunch of points. The next pulse was people who are probably in decent shape as far as I'm concerned, but I'm guessing that at least some of these people aren't happy. For the most part, CV students or AP level CV students aren't thrilled with a C or a high D. And then this is what I call the CV curve. So there's a third pulse that was off the charts, basically. Like we have a normal distribution that's been shifted so far to the right that we have no idea what these people don't know. And that's okay. It's not ideal in terms of informing you about stuff, but it's the way that we do things at this school. You end up with when grades are done in a way that's consistent, you end up with a graph like this, a distribution like this, where things are shifted so far to the right that you only have the left half of the normal curve. And that's a grade inflation thing that's super interesting. We can talk about it later, but this isn't surprising to me. I know that those of you who are below this 80% in the scaled scores probably weren't thrilled. Some of you who got between 80 and 90 also probably weren't thrilled. So let me just go over some stuff to think about. The first is, so most of these are specifically with reference to the FRQs, although some of these things will apply to the multiple choice questions as well. The first thing is write your answers as if you're speaking to somebody who's generally knowledgeable and generally intelligent, but isn't me. I got a lot of answers where it was sort of like, it felt like somebody was leaving stuff out because they were thinking, well, Brigar already knows that. But just you're not talking to me, you're talking to somebody who knows biology, but hasn't been part of our class. So you can't be just like, you can't like refer to like the mung bean lab or the lactase lab and expect to get points for that, because that's referencing information that like me as a test reader, I'm not gonna assume that just because you refer to something, you understand it. So make sure that you, that you're giving detailed answers, not just shorthand like, oh, remember when we did this in class, Brigar? That's the thing. The next thing, and there were a few of you who did this, it's not a big deal, and I understand why. This has earned you points in other classes, but it will cost you them here. Do not make stuff up. It's not gonna help you. There were some people who were talking about functional groups and they didn't know what they were, so they tried to come up with like names for those chemical formulas. Don't do that. You'll lose points for that. You're better off saying like the COOH functional group, I can't remember the name. Don't make up, it's not carbon dioxide dihydride or whatever, like that won't work for you. Same with processes. If you're not sure what the correct vocabulary is, don't make something up. If you write the wrong word, like carbonyl instead of carboxyl, that's okay, because you won't get the point, but it won't cost you anything. But an actual reader on an AP exam is gonna know if you are just making stuff up, and it'll end up costing you more than if you're just don't put something. be real specific. Some people were talking about like the results of the sugar test. Well, it wasn't a sugar test, it was a glucose test. There were 3 sugars involved in that particular test question. A sugar test could have measured any one or all 3 of those. So you have to be real specific. If we're doing a glucose test, it will measure glucose. If we're doing a sugar test, it might measure glucose and some other stuff as well. Some people didn't answer everything from the question. So like there was the one where it said like, how might this affect the structure and function? But some people didn't say anything about that. So make sure that you look through the whole question and answer all the parts of it. And then double check your answers for consistency. I know some of you there were things that people just didn't know, and that's like its own thing. Like ideally you'll know everything, but realistically you won't. But it's painful to me when I see somebody write 2 different things and then I don't know which one they actually thought. So there were some people, for example, who said, if you're lactose intolerant, glucose levels will rise. And then later on, they said, if you're lactose intolerant, glucose levels won't rise. Well, one of those is right, but you push both of them so that they cancel each other out. You don't get the points for that because it looks like you're just kind of covering all the bases. I don't think that's what was going on. I don't think you were just trying a little strategy. I think you just wrote the wrong thing, but I didn't know which one you really thought. Okay, so this is during the test stuff. We will have more test practice that's specific to AP style tests, which have their own AP style trickery. And we'll talk about that more as we do test practice. But these are general things to think about. When you're studying, there's some other things that you should kind of keep in mind. The first thing is those videos that I make might be really useful for some of you. And I watch them because sometimes, like especially if I'm writing an exam, I can't always remember exactly what I emphasized or exactly what I said. So I'll go back and I'll watch my own videos to like make sure that I was clear about something, which means you all can get more test questions right if you have the time and energy to go through those videos. Listening to me blah 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 is painful. I get it. I wouldn't want to do it either. I don't. Google will automatically put closed captioning. So what I do when I'm reviewing my own videos is I mute it and I put it on 2x speed, and then I just read along with what I'm saying. And there's like ums and stutters, and sometimes you have to turn the sound on to figure out what I actually said because Google gets it wrong, but it's pretty good. And it's a great way to review material. This one, I could tell that a bunch of you are used to having some sort of support materials, notes or note cards or like something that you can use to help you remember stuff, but you don't have it here. You will have an equation sheet. There's an AP biology equation sheet that you'll get. But there's nothing else on there that's really useful. So all the vocabulary, all the concepts, that all has to be stuff that you actually know. You have to remember the words. I told you that there was one thing that wasn't going to be on the exam. Those standard error and the mean calculations, I said, it's not on there. Everything else is fair game. So just be aware that, and I don't know if this bit anybody, but I wanted to emphasize it because down the road, like you should know, everything that we talk about during a window between exams is fair game for the exam. So just like know it all. And then I mentioned this the other day, and this is not a judgment thing. It is okay with me if you prioritize other classes. Super okay with me. But if you do that, you might not get the same grade in all your classes. So if you prioritize another class and you don't do as much work for AP Biology, it might mean that you don't get as high of a grade. So just be aware of that, because I know grades are really important, and I know that some of your other teachers give you work that feels like, well, I have to do this, but I don't have to do the AP Biology. And that probably isn't accurate. If you want to get the same grade in this class as in another honors or advanced or AP class, you're gonna need to put about the same amount of time into it. Some general things to think about, and this is something where, like, as I'm looking around, I didn't tell you to close your Chromebooks. There's a bunch of Chromebooks open. I don't know what you're looking at. So if you're not thinking and looking at biology, then you're potentially costing yourself points on some future exam. When you're working on stuff, it's the same deal. What I want is for us to feel like a biology lab, and in a real biology lab, like at OSU or at a for-profit biology research lab, people chat and laugh, and that happens. But mostly what they do is they talk about biology, and that's what you should be doing as well. So as we're like in the back doing lactase measurements, if you're spending your time like chatting, then you're not actually thinking about the lab. And one of those questions really related a lot to, one of the FRQs really related a lot to the lactase lab. So if you weren't mentally engaged while you were doing that, it might have cost you. Again, with no judgment and no guilt, it is fine with me if you choose not to come in outside of class. But if you want to maximize your learning and your grade, you should come here when you can. If nothing else, schedule like a lunch a week to come in here with a couple other AP biology students. If I can help you with anything, I will. If nothing else, you can chat about biology stuff. If you have more specific questions, make an arrangement with me. Can I come in during this period? Can I come in during this period? You could also email me. I'll do if we don't have any time to meet during the day, but we really need to talk, I'll set up a Google Meet and I'll meet with you evenings or weekends because I want to help you with this stuff. So if you communicate with me and say, I didn't get the whole lactase thing, we can talk about that either in person or over a Google Meet. And you're always welcome here. You can just come in. You don't need to ask. You just come in. And unless I'm having unless somebody's yelling at me and it's private, you can come in, whatever else is going on, just make yourself at home, and it's a great habit to get into, especially for those of you who are thinking about advanced science in college, because that's where things really start to take off, is when you are just immersing yourself in an academic environment and just soaking up the feel. That's what I would like for you if you're interested in that. I don't know the degree to which this is an issue for you, but I do assign points, formative points, for a lot of the work that we do. That's gonna become less and less. There's gonna be more and more of those employability skills that don't affect your grade directly. But if you're doing the assignments to learn stuff, it'll pay off. If you're just writing stuff down and turning it in and you're not really thinking about it, then you might get those formative points, but it'll cost you on the exam. And then I often think about how do I know? How do I know if I know this stuff well enough? And what I would suggest to you is that you will test well on anything that you could stand up with no notes, just a whiteboard and a dry erase marker, and explain to somebody. If you could pick up a dry erase marker and say, okay, well, lactase has 2 monomer sugars. The lactose has 2 monomer sugars. Lactase is an enzyme that facilitates a cleavage reaction there. Those 2 monomers split apart and you end up with 1 galactose and 1 glucose. If you do a glucose-specific test, then if lactose is present, you won't see any glucose because it's not there yet. But if you add some functional lactase, you'll break that lactose apart into 2 pieces, and a glucose test will record the presence of glucose. If you can say that, just the way I did, with a dry erase marker and a whiteboard, you're in good shape. If you can't, then you probably don't know it well enough. And some of the things that we do, you won't need to know at that level. Like, you don't need to memorize every single one of the names of the functional groups. I told you that. But I did say you'll need to know, like, the parts of an amino acid. So, carboxyl group, amine group. You should know the names of the parts of that amino acid. Okay, other things, real quick. I didn't take off points for this because I get it, but for the study guides, we have one for every unit, and they look kind of the same format. Whether you do them on your own paper or whether you print them, you do not need to take a picture of the whole thing. Just take a picture of like one page, but I want the hard copy as well. This is always gonna be employability skills, but this is gonna be useful information for us. If you are routinely turning in a study guide that is hardly complete at all, and you're acing the exams, then the information that's being communicated is, you don't really need to do them. And so if you don't do them, it's not gonna be a big deal. But if you're not getting the exam scores that you want, and we look at your study guide, and you only did the first page, then we know that that's something that like you could add to the mix. These tests are gonna get more challenging. I told you that already, but just bear in mind that what you should expect is by like the 4th unit exam or so, it's gonna look and feel like the actual AP exam. I mentioned this already too. The FRQs for this exam, maybe the next one, it's a little bit loosey-goosey, but ultimately we're gonna shift to having a scoring rubric, and if you want the point, you have to do what it says. They're very inflexible. And I'll show you some examples of like the questions that people ask on the AP Biology Facebook group. They'll be like, you know, if a student uses a single quote instead of a double quote, do I take off a point? Like, it's insane the way that some of these things are graded. Yeah, it's so, I don't like it at all, but you have to get used to it. And then the last thing is, I curved this test to protect your grades. You deserve it, but going forward, I'm not always gonna do that. What I will do is look at a test and evaluate whether or not it was just plain too hard. If I give you a test that's too hard, I'll curve it because that's fair to you. I don't think this test was too hard. And this is my evidence for that. Look at how many people got A's on the raw scores. 16 people plus another 6, 22 students got A's or B's on the exam without the curve. What this tells me is this wasn't too hard. So down the road, just know that I'm not necessarily gonna curve an exam just because you personally didn't do well. Don't rely on me inflating your scores. If grades are really important to you, take a look at your raw score and think about how happy you would have been with that. If you're in this group, what I would say is, we need to make a change. You need to make a change, and I need to help you make that change. I will help you figure out how to study differently. I will help you find resources that can help you. I will talk with you individually to work through material. Like, I'm committed to helping you learn this stuff, but ultimately it's gotta be you. It's just, you have to know it, and I'll do everything I can to get you there. All right, any questions about any of that? Okay, so let's take a break.